Okay, wall paneling. Let's take a look at this wall. I think if I look at scene 3, that's a good place to start. Okay, just going to take a look at this one wall and dissect it really quickly before we go in. Obviously, there's been materials added to this, and that's something that we'll do in a little bit. I know we've kind of covered material adding before, so there's nothing really revolutionary about any of the material adding to this. It's all pretty straightforward, but I will cover that in a moment. As I click on this, you can see that these are all actually separate little groups, these little pieces, and this piece up above. So let me go ahead and hide those. So I'm just clicking on them and I'm hiding them. And then I'm opening this wall up. And what I've done is I've done this material change on the face of this group. So what needs to happen first is the pattern or the rhythm of the paneling needs to be established. We need to find these lines and decide how we want this paneling to look. Then using Follow Me, we'll make this separate piece here, this actual molding piece. And then after that, we will use the path to merge with this face and we'll make these shapes. So let's go back to the white model here. And this is if you want to follow along or do something similar, or even if you just want to do a rhythm of squares, or if you don't want to do any paneling at all, no worries. This is just really more for demonstration than it is that you have to do it for the assignment. I'm just hiding those casings as I start. Okay, so what I want to do first is I want to establish a line that matches up with the top of the door. Okay, so that's why I hid those casings. Now I want to come in 4 inches. This is arbitrary. I've kind of made this up. This is not necessarily like a rule or anything like that. I got to start somewhere. So coming in 4 inches off of either side of the casing with the guide, and then I'll come up another 4 inches off of the floor. Okay. Now let's say I have to just start establishing a rhythm. Maybe I had 3, 4 different panels here. Sometimes I like to, using a rectangle, I like to just use a dummy piece of geometry that helps me discover the breakup of different elements. So it'll make more sense, I think, as I do it. So I just make this into a group, and I copy this across. Now I can divide by 2, and that'll give me my center. I can divide by 3. I can divide by 4, and I can actually start to find I can basically create that exact same spacing. So that's the point of that. So I'm going to divide by 2. Okay, and then I'm going to make a rectangle here. Make that into a group. Now I'm going to get rid of these little placeholders. I've still got my guides in place. So this is the beginning of my panel. If I wanted to start just with a rectangle, this would be fine. But I'm just going to add an extra element here, which is this little curved thing. And I think I made it 6 inches. So I'm just going down 6 inches around all the corners just to establish this detail in the corner. Okay. So 6 all the way around. Now I can just delete that stuff that I don't need. And this is now going to become my path. So I'm not going to make this into a component because this will eventually be something that I don't keep. So here I'm copying 1 over because these 2 are exactly the same. But when I get to these edge pieces, let me establish the 4 inches again. So using my tape, I just go 4 off of the edge of the wall and 4 off of the edge of the casing. Now if I bring this over and copy this guy, you'll see it's a little too big. So what I'll do is I'll open this shape up. Whoops. Sometimes it might be difficult because it's just now a series of lines. So I've opened the shape up. I'll select just the lines I want to move, which are these arcs and this line, and I'll start moving them along the red axis until I can see the line I want to grab. I'll select that line and then move it back along that red axis until it hits that point again. Okay, great. So I'll probably have to repeat that same thing here, but it's the same idea, so I won't waste all of our time. And then I think what I did was I went up another 4 inches like this or maybe it was 6. And I believe I matched the top of this. Okay, so this is what I would do again. I would copy this paneling piece up like that. Then I would open it up, and I would grab the elements I want to move, and I would start to move them down along the blue until I can see that top line, and then I would grab that top line and move it until it hit that point. So it's really kind of using the 2D geometry to start establishing the rhythm of what you want to be designing. Okay, so I'm not going to keep adding the rest of the wall, and I basically repeated that exact same idea all the way across, but the very first thing I did is I did this all the way throughout these 3 walls. So I did it on this wall, and over here as well. So you just kind of establish your paths along the wall as you go. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll create a little molding piece. So just using a little rectangle down here, and I'm not even going to worry about the size. I make this into a group. I open it up. I'll use my little pie tool. I probably don't want my sides to be at 30 anymore because that's going to be a lot of faces for a really tiny piece. So I'm going to drop it back down to 12 by typing 12 and then enter. Then I'll start from this end point and drag it down like this. And then I'm just making a new line here just to kind of make this shape a little bit bigger. Hold Shift down. Select these lines I don't want. Go ahead and delete that stuff. So this is my little relief shape, and I kind of want to squash it down. It's a little bit high, so I'm just going to squash it in like that. So let me just bring this up somewhere along this line. So it's probably a good idea to save this off to the side. So I'm going to make a copy and just drop that somewhere on the floor where I can see it again. Sometimes if I'm doing a really elaborate model, I'll actually make a little section over here called moldings, and I'll keep them placed over there throughout the whole model just in case I ever need to go back and grab them again. So maybe I should copy this guy over here as well. I'll keep one over here and one here while I'm working. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this path along the green axis and move it out into space. Now that it's a path, I can explode it. I'm keeping it here along the wall because what I want to do eventually is I want to use this shape to define the material change on this plane. I want to fuse this shape with this plane here so that I can easily make this the green color and this the wallpaper on the inside. All right, now I'll select my shape, and I'll also explode that. Double click on the path, activate follow me, and then click once on that face. Sometimes you see that little warning sign pop up. As long as it did the full path all the way through, you're fine. Okay, now I'll triple click on that and make it a group. And I don't need to do that same follow me here because this is exactly the same size. So I can copy and just place it right over there. I have the option of repeating this same gesture over here because this is now a different size. So we can repeat that by selecting the path, bringing it out into space, exploding it, exploding this, double clicking on the path, and then engaging follow me, clicking on that face, triple click to make a group. So we can do it that way, or we can try this, which is, I'll do it with this one instead. We can make a copy of this one, bring it up, match it to that point, open it up, select the 3D parts that you want to move, and just move them up along the blue axis. So there's a couple, as long as you've got that path to follow, you don't have to do any more real thinking, which is kind of nice. You can just use the elements you have in place and copy them over. Okay, so that's just about how I did this paneling throughout this room. What you don't need anymore is you don't need the path here. I'm not going to do this whole wall because you get the idea. And I'm going to now delete this because for demonstration, I don't need this anymore. And I know that I've got a copy of it over here in case I need to access it again. Okay. hide, hide all of that molding element stuff that you don't need. And I can go ahead and Shift D or Edit Delete Guides. Now I want to select the wall and these groups, and I want to lock them, select everything else in the model, hide everything else, and unlock. This, if I open this up and I want to paint this a color, let's say I want this to be green, and then I want the inside of these to be this kind of tan color. That's not going to work because these are not connected. There's no speaking back and forth between these two, the shapes and the 3D object or the plane. And you can tell because these are bold lines. If this was actually a shape drawn on this face, the lines would be thinner. See that? See how this is kind of a thinner line and that's a bold line? Here I'm able to paint my material with no problem. I've made a shape on the face of this surface, and I've created two separate faces within the same plane. So I've gotten some questions before about why would you want to not have your material be sitting on top of something else. If you have one plane like this, you really want to be able to edit it and to be able to select different shapes and paint the materials right on this face, because you don't want this to happen. Take a look at this. I'm going to open this up and I'm just going to repair it by drawing a line across. So now this is a solid, now this has got a solid material. So let's say I want this guy to be green. So that's green. Now I want the inside behind face to be this kind of tan color. Okay, so what's happening? I've got flickering going on. And the reason that's happening is because this is sitting perfectly on top of this plane. We've got two planes occupying the same space. If I move it out along the green axis, it's not going to flicker anymore. But when it's sitting on top of it, you get that crazy flicker action. We don't want that. So how can we merge these things together? Okay, so this is going to introduce a new tool which is called Intersect Selected. And we're going to use this in a few different ways in the videos to come. So let's look at the very first opportunity to use it. And let's see if this works. I'm going to go ahead and select everything and explode it. Okay, perfect. So here's what happened. Because these were occupying the same space, I was able to get these things to all merge together. Now, for some reason, this always seems to happen, where somehow one of the faces doesn't work. So this face is not working anymore. And I don't understand why that's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to right click and I'm going to do Intersect Faces with Selection. Click. Now what happens is it merges that together. And we'll explore this again in a moment, but let's try that one more time. Okay, so I select the whole thing, right click, and go to Intersect Faces with Selection. And now I'm able to assign the tan to the insides and the green to the outside face. The last thing I want to do is select the whole thing and make it a group. Okay, I'm going to undo that material thing because I don't want to keep that material in the model, but I am going to make this into a group. Now go back to my working perspective. So what I did in my big model was I was able to choose my materials now and isolate this. I got rid of all of the moldings, so I hid everything, but I kept this group, and now I'm able to select the face of the actual wall and then the panels within, and I'm able to change. I'm also able to edit these. So if I go to my material, I can edit the texture position. So if I want to straighten these out and maybe make them right on the center, I can go ahead and do that. I can sample from this one and make sure that they all line up. Let's go ahead and right click texture position. And I'm just moving it over. I'm just using my mouse. This is one of the few times you actually have to hold down on left click. So texture position, move it over, just get it kind of centered up. And then I can unhide. And because these are separate objects, I'm able to easily apply the material just to those and not have to worry about it blending in with the whole thing. I'm sure ultimately, once I'm done working through this model, I would select all of these and I would probably group them with the wall so that it's, if I wanted to select and hide the wall, they'd all disappear. But we're not going to do that just yet. So that, in a nutshell, is how to do the wall paneling. It would definitely be something that would take a little bit of time, and it takes some patience, and it's a little painstaking, but I definitely think that it's worth it to know how to do that.